Today we gather to reflect on a profound truth. The trials we face are not mere accidents or random hardships. They are divine instruments, carefully crafted by the hand of the Almighty to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for His purpose. We are God's hidden warriors, chosen and called not for a life of ease, but for a life of victory through struggle. The Scriptures remind us in James 1:2-4, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." These words are not a call to celebrate suffering, but to recognize its purpose. Trials are the forge where our faith is tempered, where our character is molded, and where our strength is made perfect in weakness. Think of the story of Job, a man who lost everything, his wealth, his health, and even his family. Yet in the midst of his suffering he declared, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." Job's trials were not a sign of abandonment. They were a testament to his unwavering faith. Through his suffering, he emerged stronger, more faithful, and more deeply connected to the one who had never left his side. Or consider Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned. Yet, in every trial he remained steadfast. He understood that what others meant for evil, God meant for good. Joseph's trials were not the end of his story. They were the preparation for his destiny. He became a vessel of salvation for many, a hidden warrior raised up for such a time as that. Beloved, you too are a hidden warrior. Your trials are not meaningless. They are the training ground for your divine assignment. When you feel the weight of the storm, remember that the Almighty is refining you. When the fire feels too hot, remember that it is burning away the impurities, leaving behind a vessel of honor. In Isaiah 43:2 we are promised, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, the flames will not set you ablaze." This is the assurance of the Almighty, that no trial is too great, no valley too deep, and no fire too hot for His chosen ones. He is with us, strengthening us, equipping us, and preparing us for the battles ahead. So let us not shrink back from the trials we face. Let us embrace them with faith, knowing that they are shaping us into the warriors we are called to be. Let us stand firm, knowing that the one who called us is faithful, and He will complete the work He has begun in us. Remember, you are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are a hidden warrior, chosen and strengthened through every trial. And when the time is right, the Almighty will reveal His glory through your life, and the world will see His hand at work in you. May we walk forward with courage, with faith, and with the assurance that our trials are not in vain. For we are God's hidden warriors, and through every storm, we are being prepared for victory. When we face trials, it is natural to question why. Why must we endure pain, loss, or hardship? Why does life sometimes feel like an unending storm? The answer lies in understanding that trials are not random occurrences or mere accidents. They are divine instruments carefully orchestrated by the hand of the Almighty to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for His greater purpose. The Scriptures remind us in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. This means that even in the midst of our struggles, there is a divine plan at work, a plan that is far greater than our immediate understanding. Trials are not meant to destroy us, they are meant to develop us. Just as a potter molds clay into a beautiful vessel, the Almighty uses the pressures and challenges of life to mold us into the image He has designed for us. The process may be painful, but the outcome is purposeful. In Isaiah 64:8, we are reminded, "We are the clay and you are the potter. We are all the work of your hand." This imagery speaks to the intentionality of God's work in our lives. He does not allow trials into our lives without a reason. Every challenge, every struggle, and every tear has a purpose in His grand design. Consider the story of Job, a man who faced unimaginable trials. He lost his wealth, his health, and even his family. Yet, in the midst of his suffering, Job declared, "Though He slay me, yet will I trust in Him." Job's trials were not a sign of God's absence or indifference. They were a testament to his faith and a demonstration of God's sovereignty. Through his suffering, Job emerged stronger, more faithful, and more deeply connected to the Almighty. His trials were not in vain. They served a divine purpose, revealing God's power and faithfulness in the midst of adversity. Similarly, Joseph's life is a powerful example of how trials can be used for a greater purpose. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned, Joseph endured years of hardship. Yet, he never lost sight of the fact that God was with him. In Genesis 50:20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's trials were not the end of his story. They were the preparation for his destiny. Through his suffering, he became a vessel of salvation for many, a hidden warrior raised up for such a time as that. These stories remind us that our trials are not meaningless. They are part of a larger narrative, a divine plan that is unfolding in our lives. When we face challenges, it is easy to feel overwhelmed or discouraged. But we must remember that the Almighty is with us in every storm. He is not distant or detached. He is actively working in our lives, using every trial to shape us into the people He has called us to be. The purpose of trials is not to break us, but to build us. They are opportunities for growth, for deepening our faith, and for drawing closer to the Almighty. In James 1:2-4, we are encouraged to consider it pure joy when we face trials, because they produce perseverance, which leads to maturity and completeness. This does not mean that we should celebrate suffering, but rather that we should recognize its purpose. Trials are the forge where our faith is tempered, where our character is molded, and where our strength is made perfect in weakness. As we navigate the challenges of life, let us hold fast to the truth that our trials have a divine purpose. They are not meant to destroy us, but to develop us. They are not the end of our story, but the preparation for our destiny. And through every trial, the Almighty is with us, strengthening us, refining us, and preparing us for the greater purpose He has in store. Faith is not a static or unchanging quality. It is a living, dynamic force that grows and deepens through the challenges we face. Struggle is not the enemy of faith. It is the very means by which faith is refined, strengthened, and made unshakable. The Scriptures remind us in 1 Peter 1:6-7 that trials come so that our faith, which is of greater worth than gold, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Just as gold is purified in the fire, our faith is refined through the struggles we endure. The process of refining faith is not easy. It requires us to confront our doubts, to wrestle with our fears, and to trust in the Almighty, even when we cannot see the way forward. But it is in this very struggle that our faith is tested and proven genuine. When we face trials, we are forced to rely not on our own strength or understanding, but on the promises of the Almighty. This is where true faith is born, not in the absence of struggle, but in the midst of it. Consider the story of Abraham, a man whose faith was tested in extraordinary ways. In Genesis 22, similarly, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel 3 demonstrates how faith is refined through struggle. When faced with the choice of bowing to an idol or being thrown into a fiery furnace, these three men chose to trust in the Almighty. They declared, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Daniel 3:17 and 18. Their faith was not dependent on the outcome. It was rooted in their unwavering trust in the Almighty. And through their struggle, their faith was refined, and their testimony became a powerful witness to the nations. These stories remind us that faith is not just a feeling or a belief. It is a choice to trust in the Almighty, even when the circumstances are difficult. Struggle forces us to confront the depth of our faith and to choose whether we will rely on our own understanding or on the promises of the Almighty. It is in this choice that our faith is refined and strengthened. The refining process is not without pain. Just as gold must endure the heat of the fire to be purified, our faith must endure the heat of trials to be made genuine. But the result is worth the struggle. Refined faith is unshakable, unwavering, and deeply rooted in the character of the Almighty. It is a faith that can withstand any storm, endure any trial, and overcome any obstacle. James 1:2 encourages us to consider it pure joy when we face trials, because they produce perseverance, which leads to maturity and completeness. This does not mean that we should celebrate suffering, but rather that we should recognize its purpose. Trials are the forge where our faith is tempered, where our character is molded, and where our strength is made perfect in weakness. As we navigate the struggles of life, let us remember that our faith is being refined. Every challenge, every trial, and every struggle is an opportunity to deepen our trust in the Almighty and to grow in our faith. Let us not shrink back from the struggle, but embrace it as a necessary part of our spiritual journey. For it is through the struggle that our faith is refined, and it is through the refining that we become the people the Almighty has called us to be. Throughout the Scriptures, we find countless examples of individuals who faced immense trials and emerged victorious. These stories are not just historical accounts. They are powerful reminders that trials are not the end of the story. They are opportunities for the Almighty to demonstrate His power, His faithfulness, and His ability to turn even the most difficult circumstances into triumphs. These biblical examples serve as a source of encouragement for us today, reminding us that no trial is too great for the Almighty to overcome. One of the most profound examples of triumph through trials is the story of Joseph. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned, Joseph endured years of hardship and injustice. Yet, through it all, he remained faithful to the Almighty. He did not allow bitterness or resentment to take root in his heart. Instead, he trusted in the sovereignty of the Almighty, believing that even in the midst of his trials, God was working out a greater plan. Joseph's faith was rewarded when he was elevated to a position of power in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. Through his wisdom and leadership, he was able to save countless lives during a time of famine, including the lives of his own family. In Genesis 50:20, Joseph declares to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's trials were not the end of his story. They were the preparation for his destiny. Through his suffering, he became a vessel of salvation and a powerful example of how the Almighty can use trials for His greater purpose. Another powerful example is the story of Job, a man who faced unimaginable loss and suffering. In a single day, Job lost his wealth, his children, and his health. Yet, even in the midst of his pain, Job refused to curse the Almighty. Instead, he declared, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Job 1:21. Job's faith was tested to the extreme, but he remained steadfast, trusting in the sovereignty of the Almighty. In the end, Job's faith was rewarded. The Almighty restored his fortunes and blessed him with even greater abundance than before. But more importantly, Job's trials deepened his understanding of the Almighty and strengthened his faith. Through his suffering, Job learned to trust in the Almighty's wisdom and goodness, even when he could not understand his ways. The story of Daniel is another powerful example of triumph through trials. Taken from his homeland and placed in a foreign culture, Daniel faced numerous challenges to his faith. Yet he remained faithful to the Almighty, even when it meant risking his life. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den for praying to the Almighty, he trusted in God's protection, and the Almighty delivered him, shutting the mouths of the lions and demonstrating his power to the entire kingdom. Daniel's trials were not just personal tests of faith. They were opportunities for the Almighty to reveal His glory to the nations. Through Daniel's faithfulness, the king of Babylon came to acknowledge the power and sovereignty of the Almighty. Daniel's trials were not the end of his story. They were the means by which the Almighty worked through him to accomplish His greater purpose. The story of Esther is yet another example of triumph through trials. As a young Jewish woman living in exile, Esther was placed in a position of great influence as Queen of Persia. When her people faced the threat of annihilation, Esther was faced with a difficult choice. She could remain silent and protect herself, or she could risk her life by approaching the king to plead for her people. Esther's faith and courage were tested in this moment, but she chose to trust in the Almighty. She declared, "If I perish, I perish." Esther 4:16, and stepped forward in faith. Through her bravery, the Almighty worked to deliver His people and turn the tables on their enemies. Esther's trials were not the end of her story. They were the means by which the Almighty used her to accomplish His greater purpose. These biblical examples remind us that trials are not the end of the story. They are opportunities for the Almighty to demonstrate His power, His faithfulness, and His ability to turn even the most difficult circumstances into triumphs. Joseph, Job, Daniel, and Esther all faced immense trials, but through their faith and obedience, they emerged victorious. Their stories serve as a powerful reminder that no trial is too great for the Almighty to overcome. As we face our own trials, let us take courage from these examples. Let us remember that the Almighty is with us in every storm, and that He is able to turn even the most difficult circumstances into triumphs. Let us trust in His sovereignty, His wisdom, and His goodness, knowing that He is working all things together for our good and His glory. In the grand tapestry of the Almighty's plan, each of us has a unique and vital role to play. We are not merely bystanders or passive participants in the unfolding of His purpose. We are His hidden warriors, chosen and called to stand firm in the face of adversity, to fight the battles of faith, and to advance His kingdom in a world that often opposes His truth. The concept of being a hidden warrior is not about seeking recognition or glory. It is about embracing our identity as vessels of the Almighty's power, equipped and empowered to fulfill His divine mission. The Scriptures are filled with examples of hidden warriors, individuals who, in their time, may have seemed insignificant or overlooked, but who were in fact instruments of the Almighty's will. Consider Gideon, a man who saw himself as the least in his family and from the weakest clan. Yet when the angel of the Lord appeared to him, he was addressed as a mighty warrior. Judges 6:12. Gideon's strength did not come from his own abilities or resources. It came from the Almighty's presence and promise. Through his obedience and faith, Gideon became a hidden warrior, leading a small army to victory against overwhelming odds and delivering his people from oppression. Similarly, David was a hidden warrior long before he faced Goliath on the battlefield. As a young shepherd, David spent years in obscurity, tending his father's sheep, yet it was in those quiet, unseen moments that the Almighty was preparing him for his destiny. When the time came, David stepped forward in faith, declaring, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17:37. David's confidence was not in his own strength, but in the Almighty's power. He was a hidden warrior, chosen and anointed for such a time as that. The story of Esther also illustrates the concept of a hidden warrior. As a young Jewish woman living in exile, Esther's rise to become Queen of Persia seemed like a stroke of luck or circumstance, but the Almighty had a greater purpose for her life. When her people faced the threat of annihilation, Esther was called to step into her role as a hidden warrior. Her cousin Mordecai reminded her, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position?" For these examples remind us that being a hidden warrior is not about outward appearances or human recognition. It is about embracing our identity as chosen and called by the Almighty, trusting in His strength and stepping forward in faith, even when the path is uncertain. As hidden warriors, we are called to fight not with physical weapons, but with spiritual ones. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Our battles are fought on our knees, through prayer, through faith, and through obedience to the Almighty's word. Being a hidden warrior also means that our victories may not always be visible or celebrated by the world. Often the battles we fight are fought in the quiet places, in our hearts, in our homes, and in our communities. We may not receive recognition or applause for our faithfulness, but the Almighty sees and honors our obedience. He is the one who equips us, strengthens us, and empowers us to stand firm in the face of adversity. As hidden warriors, we are also called to be lights in the darkness, reflecting the truth and love of the Almighty in a world that desperately needs it. Matthew 5:14-16 reminds us, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Our role as hidden warriors is not just to fight battles, but to shine brightly, pointing others to the hope and salvation found in the Almighty. The journey of a hidden warrior is not always easy. It requires courage, faith, and perseverance. It means standing firm when the world around us is crumbling, trusting in the Almighty's promises when circumstances seem dire, and stepping forward in obedience even when the path is unclear. But we are not alone in this journey. The Almighty is with us, strengthening us, guiding us, and empowering us to fulfill our calling. As hidden warriors, we are part of a greater story, a story of redemption, restoration, and victory. Our trials and battles are not in vain. They are part of the Almighty's plan to refine us, equip us, and prepare us for the work He has called us to do, Let us embrace our identity as hidden warriors, trusting in the Almighty's strength and stepping forward in faith, knowing that He is with us in every battle and that His purposes will prevail. One of the most profound truths we can hold on to in times of trial is the assurance of the Almighty's presence. No matter how intense the heat of our circumstances, no matter how overwhelming the flames of adversity may seem, the Almighty is with us. He does not abandon us in the fire. He walks with us through it. This truth is beautifully illustrated in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 young men who faced the fiery furnace because of their unwavering faith in the Almighty. In Daniel 3, we read how King Nebuchadnezzar commanded everyone to bow down to a golden image he had erected. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to worship anyone but the Almighty, they were threatened with death in a blazing furnace. Their response to the king is a powerful declaration of faith. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and He will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if He does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Daniel 3:17 verses 18. These young men understood that the Almighty's presence was not contingent on their deliverance from the fire. They trusted in His sovereignty whether He chose to save them or not. When they were thrown into the furnace, something extraordinary happened. The fire was so intense that it killed the soldiers who threw them in, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were unharmed. Even more astonishing, King Nebuchadnezzar saw not 3 but 4 figures walking in the fire, unbound and unharmed. He exclaimed, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Daniel 3:25. The Almighty was present with them in the fire, protecting them and demonstrating His power in a way that left the king in awe. This story is a powerful reminder that the Almighty's presence is not limited by our circumstances. When we walk through the fire, He is with us. Isaiah 43:2 assures us, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, the flames will not set you ablaze." This promise does not mean that we will never face trials or difficulty. Rather, the fire is also a place of revelation. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in the furnace, the Almighty revealed Himself in a way that was visible even to those who did not believe. King Nebuchadnezzar, who had once been an adversary, was transformed by what he saw. He declared, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent His angel and rescued His servants. They trusted in Him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." Daniel 3:28. The fire became a platform for the Almighty to display His power and glory not only to His people but to the nations. In our own lives, the fire can be a place where the Almighty reveals Himself in new and profound ways. When we walk through trials, we often experience His presence more deeply than ever before. We learn to trust Him in ways we never have before, and we see His faithfulness in ways that strengthen our faith and inspire those around us. The fire is not just a place of testing, it is a place of transformation. The Almighty's presence in the fire also reminds us that we are never alone. No matter how intense the heat, no matter how overwhelming the flames, He is with us. He does not abandon us to face our trials on our own. He walks with us every step of the way. His presence is our comfort, our strength, and our assurance that we will not be consumed. As we navigate the fires of life, let us hold fast to the truth of the Almighty's presence. Let us remember that the fire is not the end of the story. It is a place where He refines us, reveals Himself, and demonstrates His power. Let us trust in His promises, knowing that He is with us in the fire, and that His presence is greater than any trial we may face. Trials are often seen as obstacles, as moments of suffering or difficulty that we must endure, but in the hands of the Almighty, trials are not merely obstacles, they are opportunities. They are the training ground where our faith is tested, our character is refined, and our strength is developed. Trials prepare us for victory, shaping us into the people the Almighty has called us to be, and equipping us to fulfill His purposes. The Scriptures are filled with examples of individuals whose trials prepared them for victory. Consider the story of David, a young shepherd who faced countless trials before he became king of Israel. Long before he defeated Goliath, David spent years in the wilderness tending sheep and facing dangers such as lions and bears. These trials were not meaningless. They were preparing him for the battles he would later face. When David stood before Goliath, he was not intimidated by the giant's size or strength. He declared, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." 2 Samuel 17:37. David's trials had prepared him for victory, teaching him to trust in the Almighty's power and faithfulness. Similarly, the story of Joseph demonstrates how trials prepare us for victory. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned, Joseph endured years of hardship and injustice. Yet through it all, he remained faithful to the Almighty. He did not allow bitterness or resentment to take root in his heart. Instead, he trusted in the sovereignty of the Almighty, believing that even in the midst of his trials, God was working out a greater plan. Joseph's trials were not the end of his story. They were the preparation for his destiny. When the time came, Joseph was elevated to a position of power in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. Through his wisdom and leadership, he was able to save countless lives during a time of famine, including the lives of his own family. Joseph's trials had prepared him for victory, equipping him with the wisdom, humility, and faith he needed to fulfill the Almighty's purpose. The story of Moses is another powerful example of how trials prepare us for victory. After fleeing Egypt, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, tending sheep and living in obscurity. These years were not wasted, they were a time of preparation. In the wilderness, Moses learned humility, patience, and dependence on the Almighty. When the time came for him to lead the Israelites out of slavery, Moses was ready. His trials had prepared him for victory, equipping him with the faith and courage he needed to face Pharaoh and lead the Israelites to freedom. These examples remind us that trials are not the end of the story. They are the preparation for victory. The Almighty uses trials to shape us, to refine us, and to equip us for the battles we will face. James 1:2-4 encourages us to consider it pure joy when we face trials because they produce perseverance, which leads to maturity and completeness. This does not mean that we should celebrate suffering, but rather that we should recognize its purpose. Trials are the forge where our faith is tempered, where our character is molded, and where our strength is made perfect in weakness.